Hi everyone, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Michelle Derrig and I am the author of Only For Me, so I wanted to thank you for agreeing to be part of this initiative. I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about how I came to write the book. So it was 5 years ago now when I went out for dinner with some friends, and on this night I heard about two separate cases where young children had been sexually abused by children their own age. And both of these events occurred right in my immediate community. So in the first case, the little boys involved were 7, and in the second case they were 9. Incidentally, both happened to occur while on playdates at the park. So in the first case, the little boy disclosed to his mum on the way home that the other 7-year-old had been touching him inappropriately while they played on the play equipment. And in the second case, the abuse actually took place in the public toilet. So the boys were 9, and because the mum had other children to look after, she sent her son and his friend together as a safety mechanism, but she was actually quite concerned at one point, so she thought they were taking a little bit longer than they should, and she went in to discover that her son was actually being abused by the other 9-year-old. So both very sad cases, and what we do know is that in the first case, that young 7-year-old had actually inadvertently come across pornography on his iPad several months before, and whilst his parents had put measures in place to stop him accessing that material, they weren't actually aware of the fact that he was acting out because of what he'd been exposed to. And in the second case, from the information we were given, it's very likely that that young 9-year-old was in fact a victim of abuse himself, and that he was simply reenacting what was being done to him. So I came home from this night deeply shocked, because I had no idea that my children were at risk of abuse by children their own age, by their own peers, and nor had I ever considered that abuse could actually occur whilst children were being supervised by their mother or by a carer. So it really enlightened me into just how serious an issue this is. And I guess for me, although I'd had really basic conversations with my children, I had never gone into much detail, and part of that was because I had really felt that I needed to protect their innocence, and I really struggled with the fact that our children have to grow up in such a over-sexualised world where they just seem to grow up so quickly. So it was at this point that I recognised that I do in fact have a responsibility to my children to educate them and empower them, and I could no longer sort of bury my head in the sand, but that I actually had to teach them that their body was private and that they have a right to protect that privacy. So the process then began where I started to learn about the sorts of information that we need to teach our children in order to help keep them safe. And I also wanted to be able to present that information in a way that did protect our children's innocence and, still maintain that sense of dignity and gentleness, and presented the information without, alarming them too much. So it was at that point that I decided to sit down and create a resource for parents to help them do this, and indeed myself. And as part of that process of writing Only For Me, I consulted with child protection experts, including Act for Kids, who are one of Australia's leading child protection organisations. But I also looked at the research and the reality of childhood sexual abuse in Australia. So there's a couple of key things that it's really important to recognise, both as parents or as influencers, when you're going to promote this topic. You really need to understand the reality. So what we do know is, number one, that childhood sexual abuse cuts across all demographics of society. So it doesn't actually matter where you live, what cultural background you come from, how much money you make or don't make. What we do know is that childhood sexual abuse cuts across all of those demographics. Number two, we need to look at the reality of the actual stats. So sadly, what we do know is that 3 children in an average Australian primary school class will report being sexually abused by the time they're 15. So that's 2 girls and 1 boy. on average. So for me, I sort of thought about my children's school and how much that those numbers represented, and thought about those children. And sadly, we know that this is just the absolute tip of the iceberg, because so much abuse goes unreported. But regardless, they're still very significant statistics, and really brought home to me just how common it is. So it's really important that we understand how prevalent it is, but also that we look at where our children are most at risk. So what we do know is that in only 11% of cases, a child would normally be abused by a stranger, but in the remaining 89% of cases, they'll actually know the abuser. So in about half of these cases, it's actually a family member. So it could be a parent, it could be a step parent, it could be grandparents, it could be auntie or uncle, a cousin or sibling. And then in the other half, the person or perpetrator will be otherwise known to the child. So it could be a family friend, an acquaintance, or a neighbour, somehow known to the child. So, I think it's really important that we recognise these statistics, and we also note that Bravehearts are now claiming that somewhere between 30 to 60% of childhood sexual abuse is actually perpetrated by other children or young people. So once again, just bringing that issue to the forefront. So I would just really like to thank you once again for your involvement in this campaign. I have sent the books off today, so hopefully they will be with you in the next couple of days, if they're not there already. One thing that I would like to note is just that in the book we have decided, I made a decision to actually say that no one is allowed to do these things, because the book itself is a tool for you to open up that conversation with your children. However, rather than giving specific scenarios or exceptions, I made that decision that we would just say no one is allowed to do these things, and it's up to the parent to then decide what exceptions you might allow. So obviously no one is allowed to do these things, but it's okay to have a bath with our baby brother or sister, or whatever the circumstances are that you want to make as an exception. But you as the parent or carer are able to do that. And so that's just an important thing that I wanted you to note. So just to wrap up, I just want to remind you that 100% of author royalties are donated to ACT for Kids and Bravehearts and other child protection organisations, like the Sydney Children's Hospital. So basically I look for any organisation who is involved in treating victims and preventing abuse, and donate my royalties to them. So far we've raised over $5,000. So that's also just part of the impact that you can make by promoting Only For Me and my mission. So if you would like any further information, please do go to the website onlyforme.com.au, where you'll see a link to a lot of articles and blogs that I've written, which will just provide you with some more background information about this topic. So once again, thank you so very much, and I look forward to seeing the results and the way that we're actually able to impact the lives of Australian children. Thank you.